You've built a successful life, but now what? Welcome to the Gen X Collective podcast. We're for men who are navigating midlife with purpose, health, wealth, family, work, and the mark you've made on the world. We're talking about the stuff that really matters with experts who have solutions, advice, and a sense of humor. And now, here's our host, Laurent, Truc.
Welcome back to the Gen X Collective podcast. My name is Laurent Truc. I am your host, and I'm joined today by my co-host, Ashu Avashti. And I'm also joined by Aaron Young, a personal trainer who is going to talk to us today about how we stay fit in our 50s and beyond. How are we going to build strength, resilience, and longevity? So this should be a fun conversation for everybody. Aaron, thank you for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Awesome having you. All right. Why don't we start from the top? Would love to hear a little bit about how you got into personal training and why you're doing this.
Absolutely. Really, my journey into personal training kind of starts with my own journey through fitness. I was always active through childhood and high school, playing sports, basketball, soccer. When I went to college, all the physical activity dropped. I was eating, I was drinking. I'm sure most people are familiar with that.
Sounds familiar, yeah.
Yeah. I put on a quick 30. And finally one day when I woke up to realize it, it's like, this is not good. I didn't like how I looked, didn't like how I felt. It's like, I've never been this fat before. I was like, something's got to change. So I started working out, got a gym membership, did a whole bunch of research on what I should be eating, how I should be eating, stuck to the plan, consistency. And within about 3 months, the 30 pounds was off.
3 months, wow.
Yeah, 3 months. And I felt great. Felt fantastic. So
now that, of course, was when you were younger.
Yes.
So interesting to see is, and looking forward to hearing from you in regards to, hey, how does that change over time? And especially for us Gen Xers, what do we have to do differently?
Exactly. Yeah. That's something we'll definitely get to later on. But as I was saying, I woke up, changed it. I felt so good about myself, mental health wise, felt amazing. And decided this is it. I'm passionate about this. I love this. This is something that I want to give other people, this feeling. So that's when I went out. I got my PT certification. It's been 11 years now. And over the course of the 11 years, I've just never stopped learning. So the certification from Precision Nutrition, fascial stretch therapist certified, neurotyping level 2 coach, also certifications in strength, hypertrophy, kettlebells, you name it. Just never stop learning. And I always think the more tools that I have in my toolbox, I can help clients with. So
perfect. So let's talk really high level. So for Gen X guys like Ashu, myself, and most of the audience, like, what are some of the common health and fitness concerns that we should have, even if we don't know that we have them?
Yeah, I think major health and fitness concerns, definitely trying to keep the weight off and stay lean. Just going to, like, one of the leading causes of death around the world is cardiovascular disease, right? Mm-hmm. If you're overweight, that tends to have a higher relation to having a risk factor in cardiovascular disease, as well as just building muscle. Building muscle and getting stronger will bulletproof your body and keep you going throughout your senior years.
Sure. And Aaron, I know we'll get to it, but based on your clients, obviously you've been doing this for 11 years. You've had a vast spectrum of clients. For men roughly in their 50s, late 40s, 50s. Can you describe some of what are the things that they come to you and tell you that, hey, I'm running every day, but I can't seem to lose weight, or, I keep gaining weight. Like, what are some of the challenges that they come to you and say, look, I can't figure this out?
Yeah, I think that the big challenges are exactly what you said. Like, they come with complaints like that. And then when you kind of peel back the layers and look at their lifestyle, and exactly what they're doing in terms of like what they're eating and exactly how consistently they're exercising, you can kind of gain a little more insight into that. So again, if someone's just running on a treadmill, exercise is great for burning calories, but I always say you can't out-train a bad diet, right?
Okay.
So if someone wants to lose weight, the first and foremost thing is okay, well, what are you eating, right?
And then there's losing weight, and then there's also we're going to talk about this as well, but just preparing for later life. Like we're at a very critical junction in our lives. I was talking to somebody the other day who said, this was a doctor, and said, women have to go to the doctor all throughout their 20s and 30s as they have babies and all that stuff. Like they just need to constantly be seen by doctors. Men, we kind of have it easy from 25 to 45. But then you've got 20 to 30 years of stuff that you haven't really looked after. And I think now is the important stuff that we've got to get ready, because the next 20 years are a lot more challenging physically than they've been before. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. There's actually a recent study has shown that aging actually doesn't happen on a linear scale. There's actually two bouts of accelerated aging. One of them happens around 40, mid 40s, where you kind of hit this acceleration period of aging. And then the other happens when you turn 60.
Okay.
So they're absolutely critical years to start getting fit and healthy and making that a priority.
And talk a little bit about, I know we talked offline before about blood sugar and insulin, and I think that starts happening at that 40, 50 mark. So what is the importance of insulin resistance for men our age?
And maybe just before that, because I'll put it out there. I mean, I know about insulin resistance and sensitivity now because of obviously Aaron, but maybe if you can just, Aaron, can you help define for people just simply what is insulin resistance, why it's bad, and then we can kind of get into how do we, address it.
Yeah. So insulin's it's a hormone that's secreted by the pancreas. Generally, after every time we eat a meal, our blood sugar rises, blood glucose. And insulin is like the key. So it comes in, it grabs the glucose from the bloodstream and basically allows it to enter our cells, our organs, our muscles, everything. What happens is if over time we're constantly eating refined carbs, foods that are high in sugar, is our blood glucose level is constantly elevated, which means our pancreas is constantly secreting insulin. And so what happens is eventually our cells will start to become resistant to the insulin. And then this can lead to a host of problems: high blood pressure, bad cholesterol, high triglycerides, all increase your risk of cardiovascular events and metabolic disease like type 2 diabetes.
So you said after every meal, your insulin spikes. So are there things that don't make your insulin spike that you can eat? Or is
if you're eating any kind of carbohydrate, your insulin will spike, but what matters is the type of carbohydrate, right? So if you're having complex carbs like vegetables, grains, whole wheat stuff, you're not going to see that big rise and then crash in your blood sugar. It's going to be more slowly digested for like a longer period of time and more sustained energy.
And Aaron, so let's, like I said, I will continue to use myself as an example. Tracking my glucose level and, how high my sugar is or not, seems to be tricky, but or sometimes it can be not practical. But what are the things that we can do to combat insulin resistance if, food and diet are moderately fine, right?
Yeah.
In that context, because if I understood what you were saying is when you have insulin resistance or your cells become insulin resistant, you're not digesting those sugars. You have more free flowing sugar in your bloodstream, hence the triglycerides, all of those types of things. So if I'm understanding correctly, we want to do things to our body that make us more insulin sensitive, right? Just as part of, good body mechanics and mechanisms working the way they're supposed to. What are things that help us be more insulin sensitive and less insulin resistant?
Certainly with the diet, like we already discussed, but a big factor into making your body more insulin sensitive is to increase muscle mass. The more muscle you have, the more places you have that glucose to go. Yeah.
Is that why in general it's an impact around the age of 50? Like generally men start losing some of that muscle mass as testosterone
it can start. Yeah. So the loss of muscle mass is called sarcopenia, and it can actually start as early as mid 30s. Typically it's more like 40s. You'll start to see a decline in muscle mass. But yeah, that's why it's important to get into the gym and get on some sort of resistance training program.
And is that naturally triggered just by testosterone being produced
aging.
Less by the body?
Just by aging.
Are there early signs of that?
Signs of muscle loss?
Yeah, I mean,
yeah, you might notice you're a little bit weaker. You might notice you're a little bit smaller. Okay. Get on the scale, you step on the scale, you're a little bit lighter. You know, there are scales that can test your body fat percentage and your muscle mass. And I think Ashu, you have one, right?
Yep.
So they are affordable and very easy to get. And you just can keep an eye on it that way.
One of the things, just Laurent, that Aaron helped me out with in terms of educating, and as I often like making the joke, the hair club for men joke, I'm not just, a participant, I'm a client. So, speaking for experience, because my journey with Aaron started probably 5 years ago now,
yeah.
During COVID, during the height of COVID is when my journey started with Aaron. But one of the things that, as I talk to, your friends and other Gen Xers of our age, when we talk about weight and like I'm trying to lose, 10 pounds or 5 pounds, the first place I go is like, what's the ratio? What are you trying, like looking at the scale in and of itself is not a valuable exercise anymore, right? Because it's probably not indicative of what I found for myself as I do my annual physicals, for example, over the last year. I'm able to, you lose the bad weight, but you gain back muscle. So if you are strength training, you're gaining weight. So if I only looked at weight, it would not be a good measure or indicator of what the health I'm trying to get to. So I do look at body fat composition. I look at muscle mass composition as a ratio. Triglycerides, which is, sugar in your blood or fat, free flowing fat in your blood, these types of things. So something just in my learning journey for sure is those aspects. And I know, Aaron, we were talking about it. What are other, like if we just focus on insulin sensitivity here for a moment. So clearly, anyone can say exercise. Exercise is always good. Movement is always good. Clearly, what we've heard is weight training, muscle intense, there's all sorts of other benefits, but something that we need to focus on. What other things help with creating an insulin sensitivity and reducing insulin resistance?
Yeah, I think we kind of already hit on it with the diet, right? If you're consuming less simple carbs, refined sugars, processed foods, then there's going to be less insulin released, right? Which is going to just, again, combined with weight training or strength training, keep your body insulin sensitive.
Are there any sort of supplements or things like that? Like obviously, like, higher protein diets. I think we all know that generally, but is there anything that you can sort of help correlate? Is there other things that we should be looking at in terms of regular supplements that to balance out maybe other types of vitamins or things that we naturally lose? Yeah.
I mean, in terms of supplements, it's a business, right? And there are some supplements that I would recommend most men should be taking. But again, I always say, like, athletes have the most expensive pee because they're on every supplement they can take to try to enhance their performance. And I don't know if it's necessary or even like getting the benefits.
Yeah.
So like, I think everybody should take a multivitamin, vitamin D, especially living where we live in the winter with zero sunlight. Everybody should take creatine monohydrate. It's the most studied supplement on the face of the earth.
And what's the benefit of that? I mean, I think multivitamins, we can all kind of think vitamin D we get. What's the benefit of creatine?
Benefit of creatine is better, essentially, muscular endurance. And the recent studies have shown it can also help with cognition and brain health. So if you're someone that is resistance training, it could be very beneficial. And I think the other one is omega-3s, just for brain health, cardiovascular health, inflammation. Those are kind of my top ones, and obviously a whey protein. But outside of those, I wouldn't get too crazy with supplements.
Okay. And if we're not careful on the insulin side, eventually diabetes can set in, right? Like that's the major issue. Yeah. Okay. And then for people that are pre-diabetic or maybe even early stage diabetes, is changing the diet and increasing working out obviously will help, but can it be reversed?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
okay,
it can be reversed.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about whether it's regarding insulin or not. So Gen X men and, working out the way I used to back in my 20s, where I was doing the bro split and putting up as much weight as I could as I was playing football. Things have changed. I get hurt much more easily. Flexibility is completely gone. What do you recommend? Like when you're putting a plan together for a 50-year-old man, how does that look different than when we were in our 20s?
Honestly, it doesn't have to look that differently. It certainly has to look a little differently. First, you kind of got to identify if there are mobility issues or flexibility issues. So I like to do that with using like an assessment screen that I've kind of just developed and kind of honed in on through my experience. I've gathered different things from different places and put it and made my own of things that I like and things that I think are important. Mm-hmm. And then addressing those kind of issues first. Outside of that, you're going to be kind of looking at the same thing. The good news is you don't have to spend your life in a gym. Research has shown 2 to 4 times a week of resistance training combined with adequate protein intake is enough to put on muscle and get stronger.
I was just saying, and on those workouts, are you always pushing like progressive overload, or is it just, look, get 10 up, you're good, you don't have to increase weight over time?
Yes.
What's your philosophy?
So there's actually been some relatively research that has come in, and it shows that reps kind of don't matter the way that everybody thought that they did. So before this research came out, it was like and certainly there is some overlap, but it was like, if you want to get strong, you're going to lift, heavy, which is true. If you want to get stronger, you need to train that way, and you get those gains kind of through the central nervous system. And hypertrophy, if you want to build muscle, you're going to work in this rep range from, let's say, 6 to 15. And then 15 to 30 is going to be strictly like muscular endurance with some hypertrophy. Mm-hmm. But research has shown that as long as whether you're doing 8 reps or 15 or 30 or 60, as long as you're reaching the point of almost failure or muscle failure, then you're going to be putting on muscle regardless.
Okay.
Yeah.
Aaron, I know, when we were 20s or 30s, you go to the gym, like LT said, you do your workouts. Most of us, back then, we obviously couldn't afford trainers or, education or anything. And just, you kind of learned, from, what, and you did the same workout. I remember I would go and I'd do the same sort of variations of workouts. Oh, it's back and legs, or it's, chest and shoulders or whatever. Is there anything to be said? I know, like, when we work together, usually every 6 to 8 weeks, you're changing the program on me fairly meaningfully. Why? What's the purpose of changing up the program?
Yeah, the purpose is just to keep your body guessing. Right? Our bodies are very adaptive, and so they will adapt fairly quickly to a program. With that being said, with beginners, you can stay in the same program for a while before you see those adaptations take place. So you can continually make progress on the same program for quite some time as a beginner. As you get stronger and more advanced, you have to tend to typically change up those programs a little more frequently, just to keep seeing the results.
Is that how you know? Like, once you start plateauing, it's like,
exactly.
I need to put something together.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. So you made an interesting comment that the studies are showing that 2 to 4 days a week is probably plenty. And I went through a phase where I was working out 7 days a week, and I got frustrated because I just didn't see any sort of improvement. I assume that has to do with the recovery. Can you talk a little bit about the importance of recovery and how that helps with muscle growth?
Yeah, for sure. So a big thing is when you're in the gym and you're lifting weights, that is not where you're getting stronger. And that is not where you're building muscle. It's a stressor. You are destroying yourself. You're wrecking your CNS. You're tearing your muscle fibers. The magic happens post-workout when you're recovering, right? So sleep certainly has a huge factor in recovery. You want to make sure you're getting 6 to 8 hours, depends on the type of person you are, a night of like meaningful sleep, as well as adequate protein intake just to help repair those muscle fibers. And you certainly need to take days off for sure.
So what is the right cadence? Like if you're doing chest and tries on a Monday, do you not touch chest and tries until the next week, or
it depends. It depends on volume. It depends on like how much you're hitting those muscles. If you go in, if you're doing say like a classic split where you're going chest, triceps, back, biceps, legs, shoulders, arms, 5 days. So you're going in and you're hammering those muscles for 45 minutes to an hour. They're probably going to need about a week to recover before you fully can hit them again. Whereas if you're doing something, if you're following a program, say like a push day, a pull day, legs, push, pull, legs. So push muscles being every single muscle that you use to push. So that would be like shoulders, triceps, chest. And then pull days being muscles you pull with. So that would be back, rear delts, biceps. The volume is going to be divvied up throughout the week, right? So in any given workout, you may only do 2 to 3 exercises per body part, but you're stimulating muscle protein synthesis. And then because the volume wasn't too high, you're able to recover in time for a few days later and stimulate muscle protein synthesis again. So I think that's kind of a smarter way of doing it.
So you're more of a fan of the push-pull days versus the...
Yeah.
Okay, got it. Interesting.
And Aaron, I know we've been talking a lot about sort of muscle, and I think, intuitively makes sense. And probably to a large extent, it's something that for a lot of guys, especially who've been generally physically active when they were younger and did weights, you don't have to convince them to go to the gym, right? Or to lift some weights, because it can be done at home. It can be done, there's things like that. Maybe just to pivot a little bit, there's always these sort of conversations of movement in cardio. What's that balancing act to the muscle and the strength training? What is, and especially in context to our 50s, like, what I don't have? I don't have, 3 hours a day to go run or do whatever. And I'm on conference calls, and I've got how do we bring those pieces into that? And what is that other half other than weight training?
Yeah. So first I'll start with cardio. So cardio is important, and it shouldn't be neglected at all. Right. So the good thing though is you can kind of still get your cardio in. Like for instance, like a 20 to 30 minute walk after dinner, especially now that the weather's getting nice, has been shown to decrease blood glucose levels and decrease your risk of metabolic diseases. So, I mean, if you can't commit to that, then maybe on days that you have more time, I know everybody's busy, but our schedules constantly change. Some days you have more time, some days you don't. You can throw in on the days that you have more time, a quick 20 to 30 minute zone 2 after you lift weights on the treadmill or bike or whatever your preferred cardio is. The other thing is you can mix it up. On the days you don't have time, then you can do something a little more intense that's going to take a lot less time, right? Like a Tabata. Just throw that in quickly. 20 seconds on, 10 seconds off on a bike. Those 20 seconds as hard as you can. And that will also help strengthen the cardiovascular system in a very small amount of time.
Talk a little bit about the balance of, to your point, going hard, really elevating your heart rate. What does that do to your body? Benefits versus kind of the negatives, and then more of the slow walking. What are those benefits?
Yeah. So the more intense, shorter bouts, kind of, I would say one of the negatives is it will give you a spike of cortisol, but in the end, it will strengthen your heart, your lungs. Doing something like that once a week, twice a week is going to be very beneficial. The longer bouts, again, same thing. It's going to strengthen your heart, your lungs without that kind of big spike in cortisol, because it's more like your heart rate's going to be 120 to 130, right? So you're not going to get that spike in cortisol and that muscular damage.
Just for everyone, including myself, why is a spike in what is cortisol, and why is a spike in cortisol not a good thing?
So spike in cortisol is a stress hormone. If somebody's always like stressed out and they always have high levels of stress, maybe adding another layer of stress might not be great. But I don't think in this case it would really affect, because it's kind of like a spike and then a drop. So,
but what's the downside? I mean, it's our body, right? So what's the downside to cortisol? Because you brought up something like stress. Like we all have work stress, especially guys in their 50s. Like we're working, we're meetings, we're like, so, you know, it kind of clicked for me also. Does regular cortisol levels impact health? Weight, and so what's the relation? How does that impact us?
Yeah. So, I mean, like not all stress is bad, right?
Yeah.
We need some stress to get motivated, right? If you're making a deadline, you need that stress to kind of give you a kick in the butt to make that deadline. But where it can become a health issue is when you have chronic stress, right? So that stress is it's called acute stress. The real issue is chronic stress, which is long-lasting elevated bouts of cortisol, where your body is constantly in fight or flight mode. And then that can lead to some health issues, right? So that's the one you kind of want to avoid.
And when you say health issues, inflammation, like what are some of the negatives, and how does that outbalance the fact that you're trying to work out?
Inflammation, high blood pressure, increased risk of cardiovascular disease. And it also, in terms of recovery from working out, it makes it a lot harder, because you're always in sympathetic nervous system. You're always revved up. So you're never really able to come down and relax and actually go in kind of the parasympathetic, where you can recover. It affects sleep. Sleep is very important for recovery. And if you're not having good sleep, if you can't fall asleep, if you're having disrupted sleep, then that's also going to affect recovery.
So general guidelines, you talked about 2 to 4 days of weights, full body over the week, and then a couple of days of cardio, a nice blend between hard cardio versus kind of that easy walking. That's a nice complete week. Is that how you kind of frame it with your clients typically?
Yeah. That's a well-rounded week.
Perfect. You made a comment around zone 2. Can you just define that's your heart rate?
Yeah. Zone 2 is about 60 to 70% of your heart rate max. And that's kind of the zone, 60 being the lower end, 70 being the higher end. And that's kind of your heart rate that you want to stay in.
For those walks?
For walks, jogs, a light cycle.
Okay.
Whatever your preferred cardio exercises.
And is it as simple to calculate your max heart rate? You just go full speed and take your heart rate?
Yeah, typically you can take your age. You can minus 220 minus your age will give you roughly your max heart rate. And then from there, you can figure out 60 to 70% of that.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Any other workout modalities that are good? Like some people get bored of just running on a treadmill. There's HIIT, there's a bunch of different things. Like what do you recommend people try to see what they like?
I recommend trying Tabatas, trying circuit training, where you take just a bunch of exercises and smartly put them back to back to back and then rest, which again is just kind of a form of interval training. You can do it with weights. You can get the heart rate going as well as get that benefit of resistance training. You can also do kind of like it's like a cube test, where essentially you go 4 minutes on, 4 minutes off on anything, rower, cycle, and you stay in the upper threshold of your heart rate max. Mm-hmm. So you're kind of hanging out at around 80% for 4 minutes, and then you rest, let your heart rate come completely back down to baseline, and then repeat again. You do that 4 minutes on, 4 minutes off for 4 rounds.
Tired just hearing that.
Yeah, it's a tough one. It's a tough one mentally. Yeah. Mentally. So if you want to test yourself mentally, that's a good one to do it.
So you work with a lot of Gen X men. Let's talk a little bit about what we can expect physically over the next 20 years as we age, and how should we change kind of some of our habits and workouts and things like that.
Yeah, I think the biggest issue for men, Gen X men, and as we age, is going to be sarcopenia and losing muscle. If you're not staying on top of it and keeping your body strong and keeping your muscle, leads to an increase of falls, broken bones. And they actually call it like the death spiral, right? Where you fall, you break a hip, but you don't have the strength or muscle to rehab it. You stay in the hospital and you never get out. So it's really important to stay on top of building muscle, getting stronger.
Does that
would be your goal? I was going to say that, would that be kind of your North Star guiding light as
I think so.
Kind of, and it's what are the things that we're doing to remain strong, not just movement, which we all know is good, but strength, increasing or at least maintaining muscle mass and strength.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the guiding star. That should be priority one, I think.
I saw a podcast around. Gentleman was saying, as you get older, the ability to get up without using your hands from being on the floor could be a direct correlation of longevity, because a lot of people, the whole "I fall and I can't get up" thing is nuts, and it's not that easy.
Yeah.
At my age, I'm already struggling to be able to get up without using my hands, and it's a really interesting test to do.
Yes.
I was just saying, like, okay, I got to work on some stuff.
Yeah. So you're talking about the test where you're sitting on the floor cross-legged, right?
Exactly,
And without using your hands, without pulling yourself up, you basically get up to a standing position. Yeah.
Which my 14-year-old daughter does it like that.
Yeah.
It takes me what I feel like a week to do.
And it's a direct correlation to longevity, because it shows that you are mobile and you have enough strength, right? You have adequate strength to get up off the floor. And one of the causing leads of not being able to live independently is and having to go into like a retirement home or assisted care living is actually whether or not you can sit down on the toilet and get up. So again, it just goes to show the importance of strength training.
This is depressing, because every time leg day comes around, I just head for the hills, and I know that is probably the most important thing I should be doing.
It absolutely is. Yeah. I love legs, but I guess that makes me not like other people.
To that point, so one of the things, when you're doing complex movements around leg days, you can put a lot of weight to, especially at this age. Like, we're not at the point yet where we're more worried about flexibility or some of these things. So how do you avoid with your clients them getting hurt doing, big weights on squats and deadlifts and things like that?
I want to start just by saying the risk of injury when you're weight training is relatively low in comparison to the risk factor of injury later on in life if you're not lifting weights.
Interesting.
Right? But again, always you don't want to go into the gym and think that, I haven't been to the gym in 20 years. But, back when I was 20, I could deadlift 405 pounds. Let's throw that on the bar. Let's start there. You want to do it slowly, right? And if you're that concerned and worried about injuries, your best bet is just to find a good coach, find a good personal trainer to help you through that process. I always start my clients off basic movement screen, see how they're moving, see if there is any mobility or flexibility issues we need to address first. And then if they're good to go, if it's been 20 years since they've lifted weights, I'll start them off on the easiest progression of the lift. So just to give you an example, let's say a deadlift. I'll always saying a barbell deadlift off the floor is probably the most neurologically complex.
Sure.
Going back, you have sumo deadlift, trap bar deadlift, and then the first progression is going to be a kettlebell deadlift. You can keep the weight moderately light. You can raise the kettlebell up to the client to keep their range of motion relatively small. And you can just make sure that they've mastered that movement pattern before you start progressing them up to the next progression, right? So I'll start somebody off on the kettlebell deadlift. They may be one session there.
Yeah.
As long as you can see that you're hinging properly, right? Which is the movement pattern for a deadlift, pushing your hips back. Then you're good to go. I'll put them up to the trap bar with a little more weight. But again, just keeping an eye on them and making sure their form's still good.
Are you a big proponent of free weights versus machines?
I actually think beginners should be more on free weights.
Really?
Yeah. Because it's gonna help. It's gonna help with the stabilizer muscles. It's gonna help neurologically with movement patterns. And machines, you're just sitting, right? Which is not what we need. We need to be moving, burning calories, building muscle. That said, machines certainly have their place in building muscle. But if somebody can't really feel, let's say on the pec deck, and you're doing flies, if you can't feel your chest contracting, if you don't have that neurological connection yet, then you're better off to start on, bigger lifts that require, like compound lifts that require more muscle, just to build those stabilizers and things like that.
When you work with Ashu and others, how important is live sessions versus online sessions? I love the flexibility now that's come up with a lot of online sessions that are happening. What should a client look for?
Exactly. Yeah. I think you should probably start, if someone doesn't have much experience when it comes to lifting weights, you definitely want to start in person. If you can't, for whatever reason, a virtual session over a Zoom call or whatever can still be beneficial because, like, for example, I can still keep an eye on your form, right? Okay. Like I can still coach you. I can tell you that I want you to turn from the side because I need to see you in this angle, right? Or face me to the front, right? So it still can be done, but yeah, typically when someone's just getting started, I would prefer to do it definitely in person. And then once I see that their form is all good and they know what they're doing, absolutely, virtual sessions can be done. They're typically more convenient for people, right? So,
any recommendation on Gen X men, like when they look for a coach, fit and background, like what should you look for?
I would look for education, certifications first.
Okay.
And you shouldn't really judge a trainer by how they look. It's kind of genetic, right? I mean, but certainly your coach should look like they work out, right? It's not very inspiring to hire a coach that's 50 pounds overweight, right? If they can't take
a cigarette and
exactly, and they got a Coors Light in their hand or Pabst, So yeah, I mean, if they look like they take care of themselves and they know what they're doing themselves, then yeah, and typically they can help you, but definitely certifications and education first.
Ashu, what's been your experience and the journey? You've been with Aaron for a while. Did you work out a lot before you met Aaron, or was this a introduction for you?
So there was a couple of things. So a great question, Laurent. I think for me, I like to think of myself as probably the median, right? In terms of experiences and whatnot. Like a lot of people, Aaron and I connected. Aaron actually trains my wife. And so she had been working with Aaron even prior to. And when COVID hit, I think we all hit that physical wall. It was like, okay, now I don't have an excuse. Like, 'cause we were going to the office every day, we were traveling, and there was such a paradigm shift in our time. I think LT, you and I, we're going having the same conversations, going, okay, I don't have an excuse not to work out now, right? And so it started with, and because even Pam's education journey in sort of women's health with Aaron had started, and so she had started to educate herself, she would start to, share, pieces of information with me. And so with Aaron, I started to work out, slowly. And then we started to invest more and more into our gym at home. And so I do a lot of stuff virtually with Aaron. But I think the number one thing for me, and I think it's very common, is there's an accountability. When someone is waiting on a Zoom call for me to show up to do something, then I'm going to show up, right? So part of this, I think, for me was, what can I do to hold myself accountable to the task, right? And so while I need to include more cardio in my routine, the strength training is something I've been very maniacal about with Aaron, and part of that is just the accountability. So that's a benefit for me. Some people are like super self-motivated. They get up, they're, boom, they're on it. Back to, I feel like I'm like the average person who is motivated enough but can get distracted too. And so as a result, this is something that keeps me, certainly, and I've seen that with a lot of folks, that accountability. I think we all respond well to accountability, right? And so like even when I'm traveling on business, Aaron will give me, okay, hey, do these workouts, or like, can you check the hotel to see if they have a gym, even if it's time zone stuff. Like, you start to incorporate it. And for me, that's been the biggest benefit. And I got to tell you, for a guy that sits at his desk and does a lot of office work, and like my strength, like I don't have back pain. I don't, have problems getting in and out of my like a car, or, I might grunt like every other guy in my age too, but ultimately, and I walk around with a certain amount of soreness, always largely probably because of Aaron, but I actually feel good. Like, I don't have issues with movement or picking up boxes or, doing whatever. So for me, there has been a shift in just my overall well-being, for sure.
Aaron, as we close up here, would love to get your thoughts on kind of the mental state that men need to have when they embark on this journey. And if you could tie in that as well, one thing that nutrition's a big factor. Like, there's so many different moving parts, and I got frustrated on a lot of different plans. Like, I'm the shiny syndrome guy, like to a T. And so I kept thinking, oh, I'm not losing the weight at the speed that I want fast enough. It's my workout plan. Let me go find another workout plan. And it just kept failing. And I just needed to have more patience, and I just needed to give it more time. Would love for you to walk through kind of that, like, what should the mental state be of somebody who's going to go into this journey with eyes wide open?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is just to trust the process, and consistency is key with anything, right? It's no different than when you're trying to lose 30 pounds or you're trying to put on muscle. These things don't happen overnight, so you shouldn't expect them to happen overnight. Mm-hmm. And as you go along the way, you're going to have run into some roadblocks here and there. But the key is to trust the process, be consistent, and over time you will see the results. I think is the major takeaway. And then in terms of like being able to stick with it, I think a lot of times, especially men, will try to do too much at once. They will try to, go from drinking every day, eating fast food, not sleeping, not working out, to all of a sudden the next day changing everything, cleaning up the diet, trying to sleep, getting to the gym, and it'll feel too overwhelming. I think an important factor to long-term success and results is taking things one step at a time. And it starts with working out. Put it in your schedule, hold yourself accountable, hire a coach if you have to, like Ashu just talked about accountability. Find a workout buddy, whatever's going to help you. Do that. Make that a habit, right? Like brushing your teeth every morning. Once that becomes a habit, then you can address the next thing, whatever it may be. So I think those things are important for long-term success in terms of health and fitness.
That's great. I agree with you. Accountability is huge. And then making it a priority as well. I've now scheduled the mornings that I'm going to either go to the gym, work out in my basement, or run. And I've actually moved my work schedule around that the best that I can.
Perfect. Yeah, that's great.
But there's still a lot more work.
There always is.
And you know what? I'm actually going to look for a workout buddy on the Gen X Collective once we get this thing up and running.
There you go.
Accountability buddies. That'll be the perfect opportunity.
Yeah, exactly.
Very cool. All right. Last summary, like, what 50-year-old men, what are kind of the 3 things you would tell them to start today if they're not working out on their health at all?
Number 1, if you need to hire a coach, start lifting weights. Number 1, priority 1. Priority 2, look after your cardiovascular health. Try to add in some cardio here and there when you can. And number 3, clean up the diet, right? Choose whole foods instead of processed foods, refined carbs. Those would be my top 3.
Perfect.
Yeah.
We could probably have another 2-hour session on diet and food alone.
It's just, exactly. The information is overwhelming for sure. There's so much.
I appreciate, you made this nice and simple. It's, you got to get started. You got to make it a priority, and it doesn't have to be overwhelming. It's better to move today than not move today, and start with that and get down the path. So thanks so much. Ashu, any other last second questions?
No. Great session.
Awesome.
Awesome.
I appreciate your time. And
thanks so much for having me on.
We'll have you back on. I appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right.
Good chat, guys.